Good evening and welcome to the Guilderland Central School District DEI Committee meeting. Tonight is Wednesday, March 23rd. We're going to call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could join with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, the first item on our agenda tonight is a minutes approval. Did anybody get a chance to look over the meeting minutes from February 9th? Does anybody have any comments on those minutes? All right, with no comments, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion.
Thank you, Joe. Mirzad, did you have a comment or a motion?
Motion.
All right, I'll allow you to second. Mirzad, would you like to do that?
Yes.
All right, all in favor of approving the minutes from February? Thank you, everybody. All right, so on to the actual agenda items for tonight. The first agenda item, as our standing agenda, is a report from the subcommittees. So we'll hear from the subcommittees. We'll start tonight with the communications subcommittee. Who would like to do that? Thanks, Maxine.
The communications subcommittee, we worked on setting up a regularly scheduled meeting. We have decided on, let me check. We have decided on, I believe it was the second Thursday of each month. So we're a little bit behind. Our next meeting is going to be on April 14th. And that's when we'll continue our award ideas and our other plans for this year and next year.
All right, great. Thank you, Maxine. The next committee is the Community Engagement Committee.
I'll take this one. We met differently than when we normally do. So we unfortunately weren't able to have everyone in attendance. I had the pleasure of getting my wisdom teeth out. Messed up our date a little bit. But what we talked about were a couple of different things. And one of our top priorities is to get further engagement and to try to get crossover with the existing PTAs in the different buildings. So we've had some members who've already signed up to just go and be present. This isn't something where there's a lot, a significant like burden or anything like that on people, but it's just to be able to be present and to be a voice for DEI in these day-to-day operations. Something that we think is really important with the engagement label and title that we have, it's, PTAs are a perfect way that we might engage the community. The other thing that we talked about with a good degree was trying to figure out ways that we're gonna support students in the next anti-hate rally that they're planning about. And I don't want to speak too much of it about it right now, because it's not necessarily my place to speak about it. What we've all agreed on, though, is that our role is to amplify students' voices, not to augment it. So that's really where we're centered in. And the final thing is we spent some time thinking, we did not flesh this out, but we spent some time thinking about ways that we might try to help others in the community who want to engage in proactive discussions and think about ways of what that might look like. As was mentioned before, our first few meetings for this year and even to end last year were really, really powerful discussions about issues in the community and ways that we might address them. And we had some powerful discussions. So we're looking to see ways that we might be able to help others in the community have that same kind of discussion.
Great. Thanks, Matt. I think the idea of amplifying rather than augmenting is a really good way to put it. So I appreciate that. The research committee, somebody to report out on that? Louis, if you're talking, I think you're muted.
Leah is not here. Let me talk about this. Last week we met. What we have been done in the past few weeks is the social framework material, social study framework of New York State, and see what we can do to for the DEI purpose. We found that there is plenty of material available as the social framework for the social framework topics in the Guilderland teaching material. There's a Google Drive folder which contains the relatively topics, all the topics basically, and the resources are plenty. And that resource is very useful, but we don't know whether all people know about it, the teachers know about it. But look into that. We have an idea to generate a survey to be sent to a group of people, like the teachers or the staff, to look into this particular topic. I have right now about 20 questions, and certainly we will discuss with Matt about these to finalize this. The tool we will use, well, right now the survey tool is available, on the market, like SurveyMonkey or Google Survey, but we're thinking whether the district has our own survey system. If we send through, it's going to be anonymous, but if we send the survey to the people we want to collect the feedback from external provider, it's free, but people may think it's it's not a school related, spam or something. But so we try to ask whether the district has our own survey system to do this kind of study. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Louis.
Elizabeth, do you have anything to as issues in our
Lisa,
meeting?
that was great. I think the other thing is that we had thought we would probably start with social studies teachers, and we might whittle it down further. So it might be social studies teachers in, like, I don't know, so a few of them from elementary and then more from middle and high school, or we don't know. But we're gonna sort of maybe start with social studies because it's like the easiest place to talk about DEI, really, the most obvious. So we thought we'd start by surveying them.
All right, thank you. Any comments on any of the committees so far?
I'll
Questions?
just jump in to say, we don't have we use Google Forms when we're doing survey work. And I do believe you can do those anonymously.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I know. I have been doing that personally on other stuff, but so we will discuss with Matt to figure out the proper pool, who to send the survey. We generate some questions that are related to DEI and the social framework study. But we need a pool of relevant survey people, but we'll close this with Matt hopefully in the next month.
Yeah, we're in the process of drafting the survey right now. We definitely want to run it past Matt as we get closer.
Sounds great. Thank you. Next up is the Audit Committee. Just a quick report on that. So we are, Dr. Wiles and Matt are in the process of outreaching to outside consultants to do the audit. So that process is happening at the district level. And then in the committee, we started to brainstorm questions that we wanted to ask the external audit, the people who end up doing it, because we felt like we might be a group that could interface and help the district, in their communications with that audit company. We talked about establishing a question to help the audit. Anybody from the one second, Barb. Anybody from the audit committee have any other details they want to add?
Wasn't there, we said that there was like a local district that had used one of the consultants that we had thought about just to get feedback from them and figuring out like if you could piecemeal or, you know,
Yep.
how that would
Dr.
work.
Ross, I think you were going to get some feedback on that.
So we actually have 3 separate leads of groups who have been working with local school districts on this topic. So we are speaking directly with those school districts to see what the nature of their experience was, so we can get a feel for whether or not it will match our needs. So Lynn Wells is kind of helping us coordinate that because some are connected through the Capital Region BOCES, some through CASDA, which is the Capital Area School Development Association, and then there's another consultant. So we're trying to weigh the kind of work that they do as it fits our needs, and then we're also looking at, you know, the cost and that kind of a thing. So by the time this group meets again, we should have some recommendations.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dr. Ross. Barb, you had your hand up. You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I just wonder if you have a cost estimate yet, and is it already included in next year's budget?
We have received some costs. They're wildly different, so I'm going to hold off talking about them publicly at this point. And we would pay for this through our federal grant monies. It would not be in the regular operating budget. So we have some money earmarked there while we're continuing to do our homework.
And I think I can help answer Tibisai's question. The subcommittee would not be the ones choosing, just based on the process, right, Dr. Riles, for costs. That would really be working with the district to make that choice.
Yeah, I think we would certainly want to bring what we learned back to the subcommittee, and then you know, talk through you know, what best meets the needs. I mean, I've seen some of the questions that the subcommittee has drafted in order to kind of get at the nature of the work. So that would help inform us of our, you know, best options. The bottom line, though, is I still think there'll be quite a bit of work for us as a district to do in terms of gathering data. We don't have a formal RFP process in place at this point.
Thank you. Other questions for the audit or any of the other committees before we move on? All right, thanks everybody. I'm excited to introduce a new standing item in our agenda called DEI in Action. Matt, I'm going to throw it over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Amy. So just to give some context for what this is and what this will look like, over the course of the past 6 months that I've been in this position, well, almost 6 months that I've been in this position, I've been very, very fortunate to be able to see a lot of amazing things happening all over the district, and partnering alongside administrators, teachers, students, community members, and something that and I personally believe to be very important is sharing out some of what that looks like. I think that folks on this committee and folks on the subcommittees spend a lot of time processing, planning, and trying to figure out ways to enact change. And it's definitely worthwhile to set aside some time in our agendas to talk about what change is actually happening and what does this look like in our building. In my mind, what are some of the amazing things that we currently do see our students doing, and really at all different levels. So this isn't something where I'm necessarily going to go through and like say in every single building, here's what's happening at GES, then Pine Bush, and so on and so forth, but just really a couple of highlights and some things that I think are definitely worth sharing while still trying to be considerate of time. So for today, I think that one of my favorite things that has happened was something that was a couple of months in the making. So the students of Feminism Club at the high school and the students of BSU, or the Black Student Union, got together, and this was led by the first initial contact was the president of Feminism Club, reached out to the officers in BSU about collaborating in February and March, doing something about intersectional feminism, and touching on the idea that a lot of our different identities play a role, especially in things like school and employment, and really in any areas of our lives. So what this translated to, after I don't think it's an exaggeration, months of meeting on the weekends and doing some extra planning between the different groups, creating flyers, doing advertisements, working with administrators and working with advisors. The students were able to put forward 2 days, and they chose the dates pretty carefully. So they had the first date be on February 28th and the second date be on March 1st. Kind of being symbolic that, this was starting in Black History Month and continuing into Women's History Month. And this was something where I was really, really floored with the attendance that we saw happen and the amount of people who came to support this work. The students themselves did a fantastic job across both days. And I think it's definitely something that's worth noting and worth some praise. Another thing that I'd like to share, and this kind of does make this specific one high school centric, although to be very, very clear, it's not as if things are only happening at the high school. But this is just something else that's extremely noteworthy. So members of the Student Voice Committee, which had started back in 2020, going into the summer, they had plans connected even with the rally of having anti-racist allies. And they started with asking groups of teachers and really putting out to the faculty who wanted to go through this and what are some ways that you can support students. And so teachers who volunteered, they were able to join on board, and these would wear pins like this one, or have stickers that they put on their notebooks or their Chromebooks and on classroom doors, really denoting that this was a place where they were going to really be intentional about understanding and listening to students and taking a proactive stance against racism. And what ended up happening, this was something else that took months of work, where students started planning in September. And 3 students in particular took the lead on this, but did a training for faculty members at the high school. And this happened on a day where it was kind of some flex time for those teachers to be able to choose which thing they wanted to attend. And we had a packed house using both of the library classrooms. And we actually had to even expand and share out where we were, because we had one projection screen, but then we realized that there were too many people to be able to just see off of the one screen. So we ended up having a second screen going in the back of the room so that folks could see. That's how many teachers end up coming into attendance. And it was something that was really, really an amazing event that the students orchestrated and faculty brought in. And the conversations that ensued the training have been phenomenal. And even though that was a few weeks ago, I'm still hearing conversation happening in the building today. So the work that we talk about here, it is translating into the building. And I think that these are just 2 examples of why it's incredibly important that we continue to empower students in their voice and what it is that they want to do. And I think that that needs to be something that stays as a focus in this committee moving forward. Thank you.
So great to hear, Matt. Thank you so much. Again, amplifying, not augmenting. Elizabeth, question?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify, Matt. You may have said, but I missed it. I think you might have said at the very beginning, but what did you say that the BSU and the Feminism Club did when they got together? Was it like a conversation, or what was it?
Yeah, so it was 2 days worth of after school events. So there were a mix of different things. There were some games that were played. There were presentations on women that the students did research on and prepared information about. One activity that really stood out to me was taking red light, green light, and turning what's kind of a simple game into looking at a timeline of hallmark events in women's history. So in moments of green light, there was stories shared about successes and times where women have overcome obstacles. Red lights were barriers that were put in place. And so seeing that kind of interplay, I think, was a really, really creative way that students were able to approach this. So it was a mix of different things.
Sounds great, Matt. Thank you. All right. If there's no other questions for Matt, moving on to number 3, the committee membership update. So on this item, Dr. Wiles will provide an update on the process for replacing members on the committee.
Okay, thanks, Amy. So thank you everyone for reaching out to Mrs. Sim, by the deadline we gave, which was March 15th, to indicate your interest in continuing on or rolling off this committee. So we've had, I believe, 6 or 7 open spots as a result of that will come into effect for the new school year. So our plan is to send out a communication to our greater community seeking letters of interest to serve on this committee. It'll be a letter similar to the one we did when we first created the committee, outlining the purpose of the group and some of the things that we've been working on since we began. And Mrs. Sim and I were also talking about this today, to have included in the letter a little bit about each of our subcommittees. So potential members could let us know that they're particularly interested in one or another. The other thing we're thinking that is if we have a lot of interest and we have more than 7 people looking for those spots, we might be able to begin to bring people into the work through a subcommittee first, and then perhaps move into the larger committee. So our goal is to get that letter out before the end of the month. So I'm guessing next week. We'll give a few weeks for those letters of interest to come in. And then we'll use the same process that we did for the creation of the committee, and that's to bring those letters to the Board of Education. And they'll have a session where they review them and then make some decisions about who would join the board. And we would like to have new people know who they are before the end of the school year so they can perhaps participate in the last meeting of the year and begin to get acclimated to our work. Go ahead, Barbara.
Just a quick question. Now, the people who applied originally, will we send them another invitation as well?
Yes, we very much could. I still have my giant red folder with all the people who did this. So we could, just like when we had some openings here, we reached out to say, please send a letter of interest. I guess I would just recommend to those individuals, they may want to do a new letter because a lot's happened since we began this. So absolutely, because we did have over 70 people in that first round. So that's a great idea.
Thanks, Dr. Wiles. Any other questions about the process for committee membership? All right, thank you. Item number 4, moving along on our agenda, Matt is going to give an update on the land acknowledgement.
Yes, thank you, Amy. So just for the update on what's happened thus far, as was mentioned in the past, Mr. Laster and I had reached out to tribal leadership, and we still haven't heard things back. So the plan is to modify and kind of add to the approach and expand it a little bit, and to reach out to other tribal leadership, and to also try to explore other ways if there are folks in the community. So I've already found a couple of people to be able to contact. So that's my plan to do so in the coming weeks. And hopefully we can hear some more feedback and see which route we might want to take with this. Because again, I do think that it's an important thing for us to do. And because it's important, it makes more sense. In fact, it makes sense, period, for us to do this in the right way and to pursue it in what's going to not only feel, but be authentic and genuine support of the people whose land we reside on right now.
Thanks, Matt. I think we appreciate the time that it takes to do this right. So thank you. Moving along in the agenda up to number 5, multicultural observances. Dr. Wiles will give us an update on ideas to share information about various cultural observances that could impact student participation on school activities.
Thanks again, Amy. And I'm happy to take ideas as part of this conversation as well. But the discussion that began around the adoption of our school calendar for next school year and the, the thought about trying to build in additional holidays. In particular, we talked about Eid, really spurred a lot of conversation about the importance of providing an educational piece to our school community about the numerous multicultural observances that impact students and their staff across all 7 of the buildings. So we were brainstorming ways if one answer isn't to build all of the holidays in, given all of the constraints we have in creating a school calendar, which I've enumerated before, are there ways for us to use the school calendar that we print, not the one page with the little boxes, but the ones that has student artwork and photos in it, to highlight each month some of the cultural observances that are highlights of that month and may have an impact on students. So one of the ideas we have is to look at the design of our refrigerator calendar, as I like to think about it. And is there a way to, in the design of the page where the photos or the artwork go, actually build in like a sidebar that would highlight certain dates on the calendar, just to let everyone know that these are important days for potentially some portion or many students within our school community. The tricky part on this will be the document I think we shared with this group that highlighted all those was 17 pages long, single spaced. So there would still need to be some work about which ones do we pick, which always is challenging because then there are some that you don't pick. So anyway, this is something that we're looking at both from a design perspective and also from information education perspective. And then the other goal here is, are there other venues for providing this kind of information? Things like our cultural fair, which will be back this year, which we're really happy about. And then just informational items that go out to help our faculty and staff. For example, just today, Marcia Ranieri sent a message out to all staff reminding everyone that Ramadan is beginning and here's what it's about. Here are some of the things that students will be engaging in. Here are some of the things they will not be engaging in. And just to be mindful of when assignments are due and when students might need some extra time and so on. So those are some of the ideas that we're talking about right now. Go ahead, Christina.
I think I love the Marcia Ranieri's email today. It's really helpful to me to remember that. I'm wondering, providing that also to students, because what I'm seeing is a lot of students not recognizing the differences between them and other students. And we have TV news and opportunities like that to provide some of that education. What is Ramadan and why do people celebrate that? And what is Eid and why do people celebrate that? Because I would like to see this generation grow up and not be as ignorant as, the older generation.
Thanks
So
for that, Christina.
maybe part of some work of some folks who can just create good resources to just throw out to Chris Cook and whoever does that at the high school, so that they'll put anything. I put stuff up on the TV news all the time, like, hey, put this up, and they're like, yay, something to put up, so that it's coming from someone besides me. I think they'd appreciate that.
Thanks for that, Christine. That's great idea. Go ahead, Kelly.
I might steal Kim Blasiak's thunder a little bit, but I wanted to bring it up. She had emailed in about thoughts around changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Persons Day on the calendar. And I was wondering if there's any discussion around that could maybe happen here, or where that discussion should happen, if it should happen. Thanks.
I'm gonna call on Matt because he knows that he and I started that conversation a little bit. I don't know if that's what you were gonna weigh in on. We can circle back too, Kelly. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. Yes. So two different things. First, to your point, Chris, about doing work with students, I completely agree. And something that can be another highlight is that actually, in conjunction with Dee, she has a lot of new books that she acquired for the library at Westmere. And during a visit there, we just started talking and like light bulbs went off. And so one of the thoughts that we had was reaching out to MSA at the high school and seeing if students would be interested in doing some read alouds themselves of stories surrounding Ramadan, and then teachers could use that. So that way we know that the stories are being told from a more authentic place. And there's also something really, really amazing about having other students that you can look up to. And that's a great way to engage students. I think that it's also empowering for the other students to be able to, have that kind of reach back. And this might start with Westminster, but could easily be something that could be used district-wide at any of the elementaries. So we have been in communication about that. And it's always a tough balance to not put too much or ask too much students, knowing that they're busy. But it is something that you're spot on about. And Callie, to your point, backslash Kim's point about Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day, I think that is really important, and it's worth us taking some moments now to discuss. And perhaps one of the nuances that I'll share. And give my perspective on it. I think that it makes a lot of sense and is a natural move to honor Indigenous Peoples Day. I think that there is a history fraught with pain and with loss, and I think it's incumbent on us to acknowledge that. I do also know that there are many folks who see Columbus Day as a day to celebrate Italian heritage, and I think that it's worth listening to those folks and their voices as well. And perhaps there's a way that we might be able to do both of those things. Because certainly Indigenous Peoples Day is something that we want to honor, and I think that this might be one of the ways where we can kind of model for the community that DEI is something that is inclusive, and that it's not about casting aside, rather it's about, building up and building bridges, not walls. And that you may be proud of your Italian heritage, but also understanding Columbus and what his actions did for millions of natives, even those who never came in contact with him, is also quite necessary and quite important. So that might be a place where we move with this. But those are my thoughts on the matter.
Barbara?
I just wanted to reiterate what Matt just said, that to simply cast away Columbus Day, I think would upset a huge segment of our population. There is no harm in celebrating Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day in conjunction or however, but you also have to think about the bravery of these people who got on these boats and crossed an ocean and, discovered new lands. So I would just caution us that we just don't cut off our nose to spite our face, so to speak, but that, we celebrate both traditions in some way to honor, both ideas and both segments of our community.
Go ahead, Sina.
I don't see why we wouldn't do it. I think last year too, am I muted?
No, you're good.
Okay, sorry. I think the White House also proclaimed, I think that day be Indigenous Peoples Day. And I think we know that we wouldn't be the first to do this. So this is, to me, not really, I don't think it's that much of a leap to do that. But to, think about it in a way like Barb mentioned, where it doesn't upset so many people who are maybe feeling like that is a tradition that they've held on to. So yeah, I understand definitely respecting people's feelings about that, but I also think, history is history, and I don't want to whitewash history. So I think calling it Indigenous Peoples Day on the calendar is really not that much of a stretch. I really don't think it's a huge deal, but this is just my opinion.
Go ahead, Maxine.
Something that Barbara said about celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day and Columbus Day like side by side with each other. I don't know if there's a nuance I'm missing, but I don't understand how you can celebrate a person who, as Mr. P said, like had such a negative effect on millions of Native Americans, even one they didn't come encounter with, and like Native Americans. So I'm confused on how you celebrate both at the same time on the same day.
I agree with you, Maxine. It feels conflicting to celebrate two very, very different ideas.
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing, Dr. Wells, you had already said that it's going to be a difficult process and task to determine how to acknowledge, decide what holidays to acknowledge on the calendar, whether that be, on the refrigerator calendar or what have you. But I wonder if that might be the goal coming out of this conversation, is to figure out what that process might be. Not something that we can decide here, the process, but Matt, something that maybe you take away is how do we make those decisions in an informed way.
Go ahead, Nora.
And I wanted to add too that we're having a land acknowledgement. We're asking Native people about how they feel about what we're doing, and now we're doing this. So we don't want to give a mixed message, like we are doing something performative, like we pretend we care and then do this.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, think I didn't want, or at least I didn't intend to speak again about this just right now, but yes, excellent points. Excellent points.
So what is a reasonable next step? I mean, if we wanted to make some kind of a change for the calendar for 22, 23, and again, I'm talking about the refrigerator calendar now. That goes to print we usually have to have that done by mid-June. So now is kind of the time when we start work on that, believe it or not. I know it doesn't seem possible, but. Is there a committee where this rests naturally?
Sounds like communications to me.
Well, the design of that calendar happens through our communications office. So that's maybe not a bad place to start. And, maybe we can do a little research to see how, how that might be done in terms of how others have done it, what other ideas are out there. So we can bring it to that committee. Go ahead, Gloria, and then Kelly.
Well, I've been listening a lot, and I really respect the points that have been raised. I wonder if there's a way of acknowledging the challenge. I mean, we have in our history these very different ways of looking at how we began. You might have people that see Columbus in terms of his adventurous nature and his willingness to do what he did. There will be people that are acknowledging that. And then there's the reality of what happened because of that contact. And maybe we're trying too hard to pick a side. And maybe the reality is that there's not a side. History has different facets to it and different ways of looking at events. And maybe there's a way of, I don't know, this is coming to me as I'm talking. So, you know, I'm just worried that we're pushing too hard to pick a side without recognizing the fact that we do have these two pasts. And we probably have more than two.
Thanks, Gloria. Kelly, and then Amy.
I think as far as like procedurally, kind of what Marie was getting at, maybe it would be something that we would come to a consensus on this committee as a recommendation to the board to discuss. So I suspect there'd be a lot of discussion amongst us and likely the community. And I don't know how much more controversy we need or want right now. Not that I don't think we should press forward with it. I'm just saying, I'm not sure all of those things can get done before it goes to print in, what'd you say, June? So maybe it's a time to discuss here, recommend to the board, discuss more, and maybe look for moving towards it for next year, just realistically. That's it. Thanks.
Amy, then Seema.
Yeah, I would just keep in mind that no matter what we end up deciding, it's going to be incredibly difficult to know every single, you know, celebration and observance that our community has. And so I think it's really important to have an acknowledgement, you know, an acknowledgement of, you know, acknowledgement of our efforts and our intentions, and also, and maybe perhaps an invitation for people to communicate something that we're missing. And also, you know, one of the things I think we discussed in a subcommittee at one point was, you know, the things that get put on the calendar, then we, you know, might not be everything. And so then we could send a link to the larger document. And I think that would be helpful and a further acknowledgement that, you know, it's not an exhaustive list of everything that our community observes.
Thanks, Amy. Go ahead, Seema.
That was kind of what I was going to say. I know we talked about the Dr. Wiles calls a refrigerator calendar. Can't have every holiday that we recognize everything in the community that everybody celebrates. Like, it's just not realistic. So to have the, you know, whatever recognized holidays that are there, and then like Amy said, have a link to the website with the other ones. I think, however the process is talking about, I personally think it's just a decision going through a couple of committees deciding if people want to make this change. But if that happens, then we could put a, you know, we could put a statement on the page of the website where we talk about other holidays and how the process that we used to come to make this decision. So it wasn't just like, you know, a couple of people in the communications office just decided to change it on their own or something like that. Just so people see that it was thought out and it was, there was, you know, discussion amongst many different stakeholders.
Thanks, Seema. Go ahead, Christina.
I'm wondering if there's a way to reflect. I mean, we can't connect every single heritage in a calendar. That's a lot to put in print. But I understand the loss of that to the Italian American community. But beyond just removing this from the calendar, we're talking about adjusting the social studies curriculum and making sure that this isn't just representational for the Indigenous people, but making sure that they're accurately represented in the social studies curriculum, because it's great to include them in awareness, but how are we making sure that this piece of history is taught well, that yeah, there was adventuring and there was conquering, and those both went together, and there was discovery, but people were already here. So it's very superficial in a calendar in some ways, and a lot deeper when you get to what we're teaching kids.
Go ahead, Matt.
Circling back to what Nora Whiteside put in the chat, I wonder if it makes sense for us tonight to, because this is already a discussion that clearly everyone is pretty engaged in, for us to make a recommendation that goes forward to board committees. And I think that that is part of the responsibility that we have in this group, is to do that. I would be in favor of us, even if this means, shelving parts of learning component, because this itself is in many ways a learning component. And so I personally am in favor of this being something where we spend some time to create a recommendation to the board and to the communications office.
Go ahead, Leah.
I apologize for being late. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This might be one of those things that makes sense in my head and is utterly unworkable with the actual Board of Ed and State Ed and all those things. But I can't help but wonder, I work for a global corporation and we have floating holidays where, because we can't align all the holidays and all the faiths and the backgrounds, everyone gets, two excused absences a year that you can use, not for being sick, but to say that these are and we invite families to choose that, your child gets 2 excused absences to go on days or family or religious or whatever things that are meaningful to them, and acknowledging that we will not all be able to get the same calendar coordinated.
Go ahead, Amy.
So I'll add, I really like that idea. I think that's something that we actually already have in place when you look at the regulations for attendance. So, parents are able to list a religious observance as an excused absence for attendance, I believe. The issue with the communication piece of it is that even though you're able to take the day and you're not, quote unquote, penalized for the unexcused absence, because it's that floating holiday system where not everybody is off at the same time, you end up missing really important things, which makes kids and families wonder whether they should take the absence because they feel like, the things that they're missing are important, but also just that communication and, understanding. And there's that education piece for the staff and the students of, this is why this person is out, and this is why it's really important to, be gracious about, what they're missing when they're out for these important observances, and how to help them, make up what they missed.
Yeah, like a normalizing of it.
Right. Exactly.
It kind of brings us full circle to the discussion around Eid, because our students could certainly take the day as a excused absence, but many didn't because they don't want to miss a test or a lab or whatever. Seema, and then Barbara, and then Elizabeth.
I was just going to say, oh my God, I think I lost my thought. I'll come back. Sorry.
Okay. Barbara?
I think what Marcia Ranieri just did is what we would hope all teachers, would do. And that is not plan any lab experiment or a test on that day that the child would miss. We had great success with that over the years, with the Jewish holidays until they became, part of our calendar. So I think if department heads would follow Marcia's lead, that would go a long way to helping our students and our teachers to understand, the importance of these holidays.
Thanks, Barbara. Elizabeth, then Amy.
I was going to say, I had one question and one comment. So I was wondering, talking with somebody today who brought up the idea, are the holidays that we have on the school calendar, are those fixed within the teacher contract, or are those changeable? Are they specified in the teacher contract? Teachers, get this holiday and that holiday. They get the day before Thanksgiving. They get Good Friday.
I don't believe so. The contract just says the number of days that they work in a year, and the district
Okay,
establishes the calendar.
just wondered if they were even changeable, if they were like, if they were specified. Okay. And then I like the idea of maybe writing something that we bring to the Board of Education. And I think if we are going to suggest, you know, changing the name of the holiday, we should probably spell out our reasons, or else we will get a lot of requests for our reasons later from the public. So it's good to just go right ahead from the beginning and state our reasons, I think.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Seema, and then back to Amy.
Yeah, I think what Elizabeth said makes sense. I think just kind of like what I said before, we put a statement out explaining the process and the reasoning behind the change. I also, want to just bring up what Nora brought up before too. I think it just seems really disingenuous to talk about a land acknowledgement and then to have to go through like months of deciding. I understand to get everybody's perspective, but I also don't know, I guess the reason against would be what, tradition? So I'm not really sure like why we would wait so long to change that. But again, that's just my opinion. I think if we have a statement as to how the process came to be and the reasoning behind it, then I don't really see how we can talk about land acknowledgement, talk like Christina talked about, thinking about our curriculum and making it more culturally responsive, but then not have those actionable items change too.
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a piece to the conversation about part for me of the education around the district of all the different observances and making people aware is so that that piece of education doesn't land on the students. So that if you're a student and you observe something that's not explicitly stated on the calendar, you don't have to be the one to explain to everybody that you see in different places, oh, hey, by the way, I observed something that not everybody observes. And I think that's something important to keep in mind.
Great, thanks. Kim?
I know this is probably a big ask, but first of all, I do like the idea of I call it the hard copy calendar. But is there any way to even do like a cultural calendar online, just kind of based for elementary and then the upper grades, where we could even do it just monthly and say, okay, for example, the December calendar is out, and we could have links on the day to information just kind of geared towards that age group, like maybe K through 6 and 7 through 12, on explaining what those holidays are and maybe practices, things like that.
We do have an online calendar that what you've described is a big project. An interesting project, but it would be big.
Yeah.
I
A
think
good
Christina,
research
though,
committee project.
what's that, Leah?
It's a good research committee project. We have a committee for that.
I don't know. Christina raised her hand. I think she's volunteering. Joking.
I do that on a small scale for the Alliance. We have a little calendar I keep in our display case, and I lean it towards LGBTQ, but also intersectionality. And it's I miss things and kids point it out to me, and I miss big things sometimes, and it's awful, but I can't fit it all. Like there's days and there's 7 observances, and I don't know if anybody celebrates Nirvana Day, so I throw it on there, and that's Nirvana like the Buddha and not like the band. There's so much, and you go to one website and it gives you 14, and then you go to another website and it gives you another 20, and you're like, I don't know how to. It's a big deal, but I think if we could create an electronic version, that's so much simpler than trying to put it all on paper, because then you can link things to it. But it is really just a big undertaking, bigger than you would think.
Most things are. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I think the calendar is the paper calendar is it's great that this year there's all that student artwork in it, and I know that it's kind of crammed a little tiny bit right now with trying to put in a lot of student artwork, so that's great. I love it. But putting in more and more stuff is just going to make it more and more crowded. So I kind of like the idea of like a sidebar, like you said, Marie. But I think that if we approach it as a multi-year thing, rather than like, okay, now we're going to cover all the holidays right this minute. I mean, even if we had one in a month, maybe every month, maybe not every month, depending on the design of that month, and then we think of it as a multi-year thing where we're going to cover a lot of these holidays, but not all of them this year, then maybe that's one way, because we need a few sentences at least about each holiday to understand at all what it's all about.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt. Are you going to suggest where we go next with this?
Well, no, I was gonna, what kind of? I was gonna say, kind of recentering, because I don't want us to lose the strand of Indigenous Peoples Day. And in recentering it back to that, I think that, or at least I would like to see us as a committee do something with that tonight, whether it's we decide, and I would be in favor of this, moving towards the change being Indigenous Peoples Day. And I think what we're describing right now with having a calendar that has other things, like I mentioned at the start, there is a painful history that needs to be acknowledged. And I think that there are some folks who have a connection to that day for, whatever various reasons they do. And maybe the acknowledgement for folks with Columbus Days, that's one of the, other holidays that's mentioned in the other part. But I think for the school calendar, it would be absolutely be in alignment with the other things that we're doing in terms of curriculum, in terms of this committee, in terms of things that we've been doing for months. So I don't mean to be pushy, but I do think that it's something that is worth, I'm totally being pushy, but I think that it's worth us, moving towards some sort of an action or a recommendation. And perhaps if we decide that this is a recommendation that we want to make, maybe some of the work that we are currently doing in our subcommittees shifts in alignment with this, just given the timeline that we have. And maybe that means that communications, the first thing would be addressing some of those, okay, here's why we're doing this. And maybe that means that research would shift and say, okay, if we need to have information about all the different reasons for connections, here's the background for that. Engagement might be, and in terms of starting to do some work with community and maybe bringing this up at PTAs and to let folks know who are either not watching right now or are not necessarily going to watch later, but to start to at least bring the conversation beyond the 18 people that are on this call and however many people are watching. So that's the last time I'll interrupt and try to push it back to that. I just think it's too important for us to not go forward, especially with all the excellent points that have been brought up, particularly by the students, but also by others as well.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I guess I just want to say that I've been around a long time, and I recall that our district, I think, is one of very few districts in the capital region that even offers Italian. And that was as a result of, I think it was over 700 people signed a petition asking for the language to be added to the middle school and then the high school. So this is the first time that this community has even heard of us axing Columbus Day. And I just hope that we proceed slowly so that we don't destroy the other good work that we're doing with DEI, in the community. So as I said, I just caution us to go slowly, be able to explain as Matt or Seamus, the reason why we're considering this, and keep the community totally informed. Thanks.
So our next step is, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Maybe we should should we take some sort of a vote on this committee about what to do next or something? Vote whether we want to, just make a recommendation right now, or whether we want to move toward making a recommendation and like task the committee, the subcommittees with doing these different kinds of research, or we could make some sort of decision about, what our next step is by voting.
Go ahead, Nora, and then Amy.
So I just wanted to sort of like pose a question, but also a clarity question. So it seems like from what I've heard, everyone so far wants to include Indigenous Peoples Day in some way. The discussion is just whether or not including Indigenous Peoples Day means removing Columbus Day. Am I correct? Okay, nodding heads. I think that means yes.
Amy, then Kelly.
Yeah, I think we have a couple things on the table and a couple, as we're looking at our next steps, right? We're looking at specifically Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day. We're looking at how to move forward with the refrigerator calendar, how to move forward with communication to our whole school community, right, including students. So I'm wondering if we have different strands of how we're moving forward and timeframes of which are more urgent. Would be helpful to put out there of what are the things that we need to decide sooner versus what are the things that maybe would be okay for us to take longer on as far as a game plan.
Let me go to Kelly and Elizabeth, and then we'll circle back. That was a lot that you said, Amy. Go ahead, Kelly.
I'm thinking it might be irrelevant, but as far as procedure, maybe you could make like a movement to say, okay, the majority we find out how many people want to do it. The majority of the DEI committee wants to move this forward. Let's talk about it at the board. And then if the board wants to move forward with, I'm just talking about changing the name on the refrigerator calendar to something other than Columbus Day, yet to be determined. And then if that passes through, maybe kick it back to the DEI committee and or the subcommittees to do the legwork of the research and present a why statement or whatever. I know that that also might take a little while, but I think all of us might take a little bit more than what we want it to. That's just a suggestion of how it could move forward.
Thanks, Kelly. Elizabeth, then Seema.
So I was going to say that I don't have any problem with moving forward, like right away on changing the name to Indigenous Peoples Day. Sorry about all that. And also, I wanted to ask, is Eid off the table now? I mean, as a holiday, because I don't know if we ever resolved that. I mean, can we still think about how we can have Eid as a holiday from school sometime? Maybe not next year, maybe not the year after that, but sometime. I didn't know if that ever got solved.
So, Elizabeth, it's still on the table, but for the upcoming school year, it falls on a Saturday. So,
right, you
just
said
the day of the week it fell on was the resolution in the short term here. But then, in 24, it's on a Tuesday or Wednesday, like April 8th or 9th. So I don't think it's off the table, but for the purposes of adapting the calendar for next year, we had the same thing happens with Jewish holidays. Some years they fall on the weekend, and so it doesn't affect a school day.
I just really like to keep that alive, though, because it's going to take a lot of time if we are going to make that change. So it's going to take a year, to figure out what holiday could go away or how it could work. So I think it would be great to keep that topic alive.
I agree. Go ahead, Seema.
Yeah, to Elizabeth's point about the Eid holiday, I think that would be a longer discussion, so we should definitely hold on to that. In terms of the Indigenous Peoples Day, I mean, Nora brought up earlier about voting, and Elizabeth, you said that too. I don't see why someone couldn't make a motion now and then somebody second it and then we vote and bring it to the board. And if it's something that doesn't even get approved or passed, then we don't do any legwork. But if it does, then like Kelly said, it comes back to here and we explain the process and the reasoning and put that on the website. So if someone wants to, otherwise I'm happy to make a motion, but I know Kim originally brought up at least an email. I'm sure others have talked about it, but I'll let that be for right now.
Let me go to Elizabeth and then we'll circle back. We got a lot of circling back here. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I'd be happy to make a motion that we change the name, that we recommend to the Board of Ed that we change the name on the calendar. I can make the motion, or Kim can make the motion if she wants to.
Either way. Either way. So
Well, we'll need a second, so.
So yep, I can make a motion to do that.
Okay, and I'll second that motion.
Okay, so we need a all in favor. You're gonna raise your hand. I'll try to. All right, let's see, we've got a combination of raised hands, and then raised electronic hands. So I'm not sure if I'm not double counting. So could everyone raise their electronic hand? Great. Oh, much better. Thank you. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I see 12 raised hands. Anyone want to check my math?
You got it.
Okay, and then who are opposed? Make sure you put your hands down if you, okay. So I see 1, 2, 3. Kim, I'm assuming you didn't take your hand down from the first vote. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so I see 2 opposed, is that right? Okay. I'm not a voting member, if you're wondering. I'm ex officio. Okay, so we have 12 to 2, which means we'll bring this to the Board of Education for their discussion at their next meeting, which is Tuesday. Okay. That was just a quick update.
Thanks for the update, Dr. Wiles. So, Matt, as you circulate around to the different committees, I think your suggestion was a really great one of putting this work into the committees in different ways. So I wonder if you could help us continue moving the different pieces of the work forward. Because like I said, and we've all said, there are different strands of the work. And so this was one piece of it to move that forward to the board, but then the different committees have some different pieces, including the research, like Leah is saying. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so Leah, I kind of touched on this in chat, but I don't disagree with you about the research and argument for why component, but I think that the vote and us deciding as a committee that this is something that overall we stand by and that we want to put forward is kind of the catalyst. And now it makes sense to me, at least. My recommendation for all the subcommittees is that this becomes priority number 1, just given the timeline of where we're at. So I think it makes sense. I definitely will be going to different meetings, as usual, but finding out, okay, what are the things that we want to do in support of this? So just trying to think of the timeline that we have for the why. I'm happy to help out with any of the research as well, but I also think that the research that was done in support of the land acknowledgement for sure serves a purpose in our recommendation for why here. I think that there's a very, very clear connection. And also, Chris put forward in the chat a while ago some different locations that we might have sources for why we want to move the change forward. So I think that I would like to see the role for subcommittees, coming up is, okay, how are all the ways that we're going to support this work in our different capacities?
Ben, I think that's great. And I think since the audit committee isn't directly involved initially, if you have things for the members of the audit committee that we could help out, given that this is, you know, a more urgent task, I think that'd be great. Elizabeth?
Would it be premature or whatever for like somebody to write a public comment, somebody from our group here to write a public comment to the board so that the dialogue can already start about like, you know, the why. So that, I don't know, I just wonder if,
There will be a committee report in the regular reporting out from committees that could be the catalyst for the conversation. Or, I mean, we can add this as a discussion item under under board president, or the committee. Either of those would work. Seema, you're not going to be with us this Tuesday though, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I think Kelly might be leading the meeting, but I think I was just writing in the chat too, because it's so soon, it's not even a week. Maybe we put it up for info at the following meeting in April. And then just like normal, we put it up for info and then the following meeting up for action. So there's a little bit of time so people can do homework. But I like Elizabeth's idea about if anybody wants to make a public comment to kind of bring this discussion up, I think that's a really good idea. But yeah, it's not even a week, so I think whatever that first April meeting, we could bring it up as an info item. I'm happy to put it under board president info, and then the week after could be action.
Seema, I think that's a good idea. And you know, Kelly, I think you're the one that usually gives the board report for this committee. And so you could bring it up so that it almost be like a 3-stage piece in the full Board of Ed meetings, right? So just an FYI, this is something that we discussed, and we'll bring more information next time for a larger discussion. But that might be a good way to do it.
That's a great idea, Amy. Yeah. Great.
if somebody wanted to like make a public comment to the Board of Ed, would that be appropriate? Would they be, they wouldn't be speaking for the whole DEI committee, obviously, but maybe a person could presumably say, hey, I'm a member of the committee, we were talking about this, and here's my reasons. Is that right? They could talk for themselves as a member of the committee. Is that right?
Yeah, anybody can make a public comment.
Yeah, okay.
With their own opinions and such.
Matt, you can add this to DEI in action maybe someday.
I would love nothing more.
All right, so as it stands, at the very next board meeting, Kelly, you'll when you give your report, you'll let people know that we had this discussion, and then it'll be an agenda item at the following one. Seems to be the hope. And Matt, you'll work with the subcommittees to help do that background research and that background work. Does it sound like a good resolution to the discussion, everyone?
Let me just clarify all the meetings. So the report would happen at the March 29th meeting with Kelly. We have a budget workshop on April 5th. It's not a regular meeting. So the next regular meeting is the 12th. Would that information item happen on the 12th? And then the next regular meeting after that is May 3rd. Okay.
That sounds right to me.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Okay.
I think that gives enough time for people to really gather thoughts and put things together to give the board something to consider that's a little deeper. I see some shaking heads, so we're gonna go with that, Dr. Wiles, okay?
Yeah, that's great. I'm just writing all this down.
Perfect.
We could like, if anybody has an idea, is formulating their thoughts about it, they could send it to their own subcommittee who could sort of, help them flesh it out or whatever, talk about it, just even in emails if we don't have meetings scheduled. So maybe that way we can meet the deadline of the April 12th. It's coming pretty soon.
Yep, I might also suggest that we will have another meeting of this committee before May 3rd. So we'll have the feedback from the Board of Ed for us to consider and digest. So if it needs, just based on that information, if it needs to be a topic in this committee for next month, we can certainly do that. Okay. Anything else about multicultural observances? All right, so I'm wondering, I know Matt had talked about the learning component, and I do want to make sure we have enough time for it. And this was a really great discussion. Matt or other members of the committee, do we want to continue with the learning component given the time tonight, or do we want to push it for next month? Because I think many of us did a lot of learning tonight in our discussion.
I think we should push it to next week.
I'm in agreement.
Okay.
Although I will say, for us, even though we won't actually go into it, from my perspective, I think what happened tonight goes alongside part of what we read coming into this meeting.
Yeah. I think so. Good teamwork. So thanks everybody. In that case, in order to make sure that we have enough time for the learning component for the cohesive equity leadership teams, we're going to push that off to our next meeting. Any other comments before we adjourn for the evening? Okay. Thank you everybody for your time tonight. Do we need a motion to adjourn for tonight? Maxine, second Christina, all in favor? All right, this concludes the meeting of the DEI committee for tonight. Thank you everybody and have a great evening.